dare you?
We already got a fiery comment rolling in.
Hell yes. So I don't actually think I've seen that name before, but welcome. I think you may be misguided about who exactly we are, because we
think no lives matter.
Yeah.
Because we're all going to die. We're all, literally every day, every second that goes by is closer to your death.
But hello, everybody. This is the long-awaited, thorough book report.
I think this is like the first podcast I'm not excited about.
Yeah, this one is going to be kind of rough to talk through. You guys might enjoy listening to it, but we did not enjoy the lead up to it, and the probably the process won't be as fun unless we're able to crack jokes about it, which I think I will from my little yellow book.
It's all you can really do. Like, so we read the book White Fragility, which is the #1 best-selling book right now.
By Dr. Robin DiAngelo.
By Dr. Robin DiAngelo. And what's her doctorate in?
White Studies.
So it's fascinating. Like, she's the kind of person that I would feel sorry for if she wasn't making buttloads of cash off of this whole thing.
Dude, the entire book is examples from her racism seminars, her anti-racist seminars, and every single chapter begins with an anecdote from her experience as somebody who conducts anti-racist seminars.
And that's what's so crazy about this, because
it's a big advertisement is what I'm trying to say.
It is, yeah. It's a giant advertisement for her services, which are going to be in high demand in corporate America here shortly. But what I found so interesting about the way this book is structured is it's structured as if it's some kind of scientific theory, but the only basis through which she's created this theory is through anecdotes.
Exactly.
She quoted studies, but I went and looked at them, and they're so weird and biased. And basically, she would cherry pick studies to validate this psychotic worldview she has. So
yeah. Anecdotal evidence is the least reliable evidence, and you cannot build any premises off of these things.
And it's so strange because I have a few things I highlighted a lot. I read the first 6 chapters. Sean read the last 6, and there's so many times she contradicts herself directly too.
That's exactly actually what I wanted to talk about too, because in one of my chapters, we just talked about how like anecdotes are not reliable, and they can form a worldview that is very subjective. Mm-hmm. But in future lists that she makes in some of my chapters, she was talking about like lists of ways people reflect against their racism, and they talk about objective reality, and she's like, well, there's no such thing as objective reality.
She said that exactly. So
it's like, well, then your reality is different from my reality,
and that's
right?
what's so crazy about it. And what I'm realizing too, like one of the most important things to take away from this book is that the black people that she interacts with are never her peers. They're always inferior. So it's like the interaction she has is always her, like all of her anecdotes come from her giving seminars to a group of people that have been forced to attend them. Mm-hmm. And so none of these people are her equal.
Except in one of mine, she mentions the instance where they actually volunteered to do it. They actually voted to have this and voluntarily went. They didn't have to go as required by their employer. There was only one instance of that in the 6 chapters that I read.
So anyway,
let's start.
We'll get into some of. So what struck me, and so the phrase that I have highlighted here is, being seen racially is a common trigger of white fragility, and thus, to build our stamina, white people must face the first challenge, naming our race, which super
what does that sound
white
like to
nationalistic to me.
Name and identify which race you are, and note that you are different from other people, is what she's saying.
So this next part I have highlighted in the first chapter is, how can I say that if you are white, your opinions on racism are most likely ignorant when I don't even know you? I can say so because nothing in mainstream U.S. culture gives us the information we need to have the nuanced understanding of arguably the most complex and enduring social dynamic of the last several hundred years. And what I found crazy about the way that she does this a lot, where she'll write sentences like that, and so it's like, but I have the answer. Like this very wealthy, liberal white woman who looks exactly like you expect her to look. You have met this woman so many times.
And this is the beginning of the fictional novel that she wrote, White Fragility.
That's exactly what it is.
And so, like, this is her telling us look, I have all the answers and I know that you don't.
Right.
So in that case, she cannot be wrong because everything that she says from this point on proves that you are the one in the wrong.
And if you challenge it, it's your white
just
fragility.
Uneducated. Exactly.
Yeah.
Every challenge to her statements in this entire book is an example that she writes of your white fragility.
And what this is, it's a religious ideology and a worldview that cannot be challenged because you're testing their faith. That's really what is going on here. And it's so dogmatic. So let me read another thing.
Sure.
We make sense of perceptions and experiences through our particular cultural lens. This lens is neither universal nor objective. And without it, a person cannot function in any human society. But exploring these cultural frameworks can be particularly challenging in Western culture precisely because of two key Western ideologies, individualism and objectivity. Briefly, individualism holds that we are each unique and stand apart from others. Even those within our social groups, objectivity tells us that it is possible to be free of all biases. These ideologies make it very difficult for white people to explore the collective aspects of the white experience. That's paragraph makes no fucking sense, because it's like, and also too, I think it's because she's so insulated in creating this fake degree for herself and in this fake department she works in and got her fake doctorate in, that she doesn't, there's no like world consideration, because white people aren't the dominant global race. And so it's like, again, it's what I was saying on another podcast. It's like, your experience in China is going to be very different if you're not Chinese. And so what's so strange to me is like a lot of this shit just gets undone that she's talking about if you just consider where you are in the world and what your standing is. And so much of what she goes into, and I have lots of highlighted too, is, you as a white person could never understand what a black person goes through because it's white media, it's, white products. And it's like, yeah, because there's way more of us here. And so it's like, eventually we'll get to this utopia that you claim that you want, because, we'll all be some beige color eventually. Not for probably like 500, 600 years, but it'll happen. And so I don't know. It's just, her worldview is so myopic and so psychotic to me.
I totally agree.
So this is another part of it. So she says, we know that to be viewed as old is we know to be viewed as old is different from being viewed as young. Rich is different from poor, able-bodied different from having a disability, a gay different from heterosexual, and so on. These groups matter, but they don't matter naturally, as we are often taught to believe. Okay, by whose opinion?
Right.
She speaks with such authority on this shit that's like she is the least objective person. So I don't understand how how in good conscience she has elevated herself to a level of authority on this kind of stuff. Rather, we are taught that they matter, and that the social meaning ascribed to these groups creates a difference in lived experience. We are taught these social meanings in a myriad of ways by a range of people and through a variety of mediums. This training continues after childhood and throughout our lives. Much of it is nonverbal and is achieved through watching and comparing ourselves to others. And again, she gets into stuff later on where she's talking about how you need to pay attention to all these things. And so what struck me is just how utterly regressive this line of thinking is. And then she turns that around by saying, well, if you are of the mindset, she literally goes on to say that Martin Luther King saying that all men are created equal and judged by your character, if you believe that that's still what we should be looking at today, that's your white fragility and you're racist.
Right.
She literally does.
I know. I know. I think she referenced MLK in one of my chapters as well. And that's the thing. It's like she very clearly points to some black leadership like MLK and says that they're wrong because they touted equality. And apparently that's just not real. It's not good enough or whatever it is that she wants. I want to find something that I was talking about. There is a point in here where she separates white fragility into male and female. And I think that's going to be an important thing because look, like there's a whole chapter on her talking about. Do you want to do this chronologically in the book?
No.
There's a whole chapter.
That's the thing we were remarking over. Of it's just the same shit over.
It is circular.
And over.
So
and
circular.
Over again.
3 of my chapters are interchangeable with one another. They could have all been condensed into one, and the amount of time she repeated herself was absurd, especially in the last chapter, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But there's a point in this book, and I wrote it down here in my Epstein's Little Yellow Book.
Mm-hmm.
There's a point where she has a chapter called White Women's Tears.
Okay.
And that's actually, so that is one of the chapters where I went into and I was like, maybe this will turn around and be like, white women are the perpetrators of this fragility thing because they feel like they are connected to black people in a way. And it's like, yeah, because they share a level of oppression. I keep hitting the microphone. They share a level of oppression or whatever. I thought maybe it was going to get into something like that. But really it was white women's entitlement, and it turned out to be like her breaking it down just made her argument kind of worse because like hold on, let me bring up my I may have written down a quote here. So white women and white men express their white fragility differently is what I wrote down here. And like it's something that we do see in real life, how white men or men rather are more aggressive and direct, and I mean it's probably why there are more male CEOs who have really fought to get to the top aggressively.
Yeah, there's like psychological basis for that in research.
And that's the thing, like she is willingly admitting something like that men are more aggressive and direct, and I think
more likely to ask for raises.
More likely to ask direct questions to get them higher up. And she also writes that women are quietly insidious or emotional. And it's like, holy shit. Like she even hates women too. It's like,
well, because what's going, she hates herself.
She
so
hates
much.
herself. She hates her whiteness. She hates that she's a woman.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that like, and she gives an example of like a white woman crying at one of these meetings, and it draws the attention away from the black man who brought up the issue. Because like the white woman tried to speak over the black man who was like expressing a concern, and she was like, what I think you mean, the white woman was like, what I think you mean is this, and then he was like, no, I didn't mean that at all, and I don't appreciate you talking over me. It wasn't even like you're talking over a black man. It was like, I don't appreciate you trying to finish my sentence when you're wrong.
Right.
And so she starts crying, and then Robin DiAngelo of course talks about how that draws attention away from the actual issue, which is a white woman talking over a black man, and it like invites pity and help towards the white woman as opposed to the black man. It's like whatever, but there is like an interesting possibility that I will secede a little bit on with Robin.
There wasn't all bullshit in it. I mean, there were
exactly.
I actually have. You'll see, I have things highlighted in pink that I think like weren't bad takes.
Yeah,
but there weren't many.
I highlighted in pink for the really bad takes.
Oh yeah,
that's what I did on my computer. I was like, this is code red.
Code red take.
And I actually made most of my notes on my code red takes. But an interesting possibility was that like white women were actually the ones who benefited the most from things like affirmative action. And so, like, back in the 50s, 60s, or whatever, when they actually introduced legislation to bring more women and black people and people of color into the workforce, the white people, the white men who were in power were probably more likely to hire white women because it benefited them to do so.
Sure.
Whether they had hot secretaries or their wives were the white women so that they could bring more money into the family home.
Sure.
So that's something that I will secede on in regards to just that chapter, because there's a lot of fucking bullshit in the rest of the chapters that I read. But this is one of those things that I was like, oh, I've never actually thought of it that way, because yes, when you are trying to get more women in the workforce and white men are deciding who gets hired, you're going to get more white women.
Well, of course. And then when you set up these quotas and you don't really have to define. And again, I think that this thing I have highlighted here demonstrates this point of like she views the world through which no progress was made during the civil rights era. It's worse. Like I think she truly thinks it's worse now than it ever has been. So and this thing I have highlighted here actually highlights it pretty well.
Big one.
She says the title of the paragraph is "We have a simplistic understanding of racism." And this really sums up her kind of sickness. The final challenge we need to address is our definition of racist. In the post-civil rights era, we have been taught that racists are mean people who intentionally dislike others because of their race. Racists are immoral. Right. Therefore, if I am saying that my readers are racist, or even worse, that all white people are racist, I am saying something deeply offensive. You are. I am questioning my readers' very moral character. You are. How can I make this claim when I don't even know my readers? You don't. Many of you have friends and loved ones of color, so how can you be racist? Right. In fact, since it's racist to generalize about people according to race, I am the one being a racist. You are. So let me be clear.
And that's not that is not just she's being racist towards white people. That's towards the black people that are the target of this book.
Right.
She's being racist towards them by generalizing their experiences in the world,
right,
to fall into all of these categories of white fragility.
And she just has such a very simplistic view of the human experience too. So let me get through this real quick.
Sure.
Sorry, where
and also all of those things that you're interspersing, that you are, you can't.
That's me.
That's you. That's not her writing.
Yeah, I'm just like, so yeah. If you're just listening, I'm interjecting my own thing on this.
We don't have it. We don't have the book pulled up on screen.
No, I know.
Yeah.
So let me be clear. If your definition of racist is someone who holds conscious dislike of people of race, then I agree that it is offensive for me to suggest that you are racist when I don't know you. I also agree that if this is your definition of racism and you are against racism, then you are not racist. Now breathe. I'm not using this definition of racism, and I am not saying that you are immoral. If you can remain open as I lay out my argument, it should begin to make sense. And so it's just insane. So it's like, here's all these things that are like objectively true about what racism is defined as.
Mm-hmm.
But then let me tell you that you're still racist because you don't subscribe to my white studies insane view of the world.
Yeah,
you can't pass my purity test.
Exactly. She has redefined racism to fit her worldview. And so that's sort of why she's able to say that even though we don't actively hate any person of color or a people of color, we're still racist. She's able to say that because her definition of racism, that I don't even know if she lays out, that she defines at the beginning of this book. I don't even think she does that. But her definition is so vastly different from what the vast majority accept as true, what racism is.
And this whole book is her definition of racism.
It is.
And which again is just like, God, if you really want to operate your life like this, you are never going to have a healthy or real relationship with a black person. It's just never going to happen.
I wrote about that as well, that she has no, it actually in like I think the very last chapter, she talks about this relationship she has with a new coworker who's like a black woman in IT or whatever.
It's always coworker. It's always someone that like.
And it is somebody who works below her. Because Robin is the head of this thing,
right,
and she has her two assistants who are black women to come with her to this meeting with the IT person, because the three of them are the team that does these anti-racist seminars. She has two black women below her to come with her to this IT person's office. The IT person is a black woman, and she talks about this anecdote in which she like jokes with the black person about like, yeah, sometimes the white people that we talk to are like, you know, scared of Angela's hair, and then they all laugh, and then like an email gets sent out later to Robin, and apparently she made this huge transgression against her subordinate black person. It's like it's just so awful, because none of her relationships are at all deep or profound in any way, because she has to constantly prove to people that she is not racist, that she is trustworthy, that she won't get defensive. And that is how she conducts every single one of her personal anecdotes, not the ones in the seminars, but the ones where she is interacting with someone herself. It is a constant battle of like, how do I make sure that I conduct myself correctly so that I don't offend this black person? But in that sense, you can never truly build a proper relationship with somebody if you are constantly on your toes around them.
And you're never going to actually be yourself. I mean, one of the most psychotic ones, like in terms of like the microaggression thing, is like when you call a black person articulate. Mm-hmm. And it's like, so I have to not tell, because they're black, I call a lot of people articulate if they articulate a point well.
Sure.
so I'm now treating them differently. That's racist. But that's like the shit they like, or commenting on someone's hair. It's like what are we doing? What are we doing here other than just separating everybody up? I want to read this next one
sure.
here. Racism and White Supremacy is chapter 2. Many of us have been taught to believe that there are distinct biological and genetic differences between races. So like this, I highlighted this because this also highlights the type of person that she is. So many of us have been taught to believe that there are distinct biological and genetic differences between races. This biology accounts for visual differences such as skin color, hair texture, and eye shape, and traits that we believe we see each other as sexuality, athleticism, or mathematical ability. The idea of race as a biological construct makes it easy to believe that many of the divisions we see in society are natural, but race, like gender, are socially constructed. So that's the way she views the world. And then I've highlighted this pink part because I think that this is actually a decent take. She says, the differences we see with our eyes, differences such as hair texture and eye color, are superficial and emerge as adaptations to geography. Which, yeah. But you can't make that point when you've said that race, like gender, is socially constructed. It's like, because that's not an agreed upon consensus.
Right.
It's agreed upon in academia, but not by scientists. There's a lot of, that's why we have that fucking debate all the time. So I'm very much a live and let live person. If you want, whatever, if you view it gender this way or whatever, go for it. But it's like, I'm not going to say that it's right because who the fuck knows? So anyway.
And actually, that example that you pulled up with the most of it being highlighted in yellow and that small part being highlighted in pink is like she's contradicting herself.
Yes,
there.
of course. That's a lot of what it is.
It's like
this book is full of that shit.
It's a social construct, but geography is real, so it's not socially constructed.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I get so confused by her circular contradictions.
And the other part too, like of how uneducated that statement is like, yes, she's right that these are geographical changes. Like obviously, if you're in sub-Saharan Africa, you want to have darker skin because you don't need to absorb as much sunlight. You need to stay cooler. Inuits up in Alaska, they have very short torsos and limbs because they have longer torsos and short limbs to conserve heat in their core. It's so biologically different. There are differences between the races biologically, and also too about which foods are able to be processed. Like Latinos and black folks largely have diabetes more than white folks because their inability to process sugar is different. Native Americans,
their accessibility historically and because after generations to fruit and things that are sweeter was not as available.
And you're not going to get like tangerines in sub-Saharan Africa.
And that is something that scientists generally agree upon.
It's totally agreed upon.
So I think what she tried to do, and it was ineffective because she didn't do it well. I think what she meant to say was that like the term race should not mean anything. Race, because I'm white, doesn't mean that geographically though I share something with people from Denmark. We don't have the same biology because my form of white people are from Nicaragua, Cuba, who originate from Spain or originate from Italy. There's a vast difference between people from old Nicaragua and people from Denmark. It's just how it's to be known. But I think what she meant to say is like race should not be a term that we use because it really kind of doesn't exist. It's ethnicity and it's like genealogy,
which is insane because this whole book's premise is to just focus on it constantly.
Race. Exactly.
And okay, so this other one I have here. This is interesting because she will not let the race and class thing intersect. It's really interesting.
She does that for all of the chapters. Every single one had a mention of that.
Yeah, it's weird. So it's like, and again,
all of
like
my chapters.
It's just, and that's like why I think she's dangerous is because like it really diminishes what class plays in our society. So. Because it's fucking neoliberal shit. It's like she is the epitome of like corporate neoliberal white woman. I mean, it's perfect. So anyway, she says still, although working class whites experience classism, they aren't also experiencing racism. I grew up in poverty and felt a deep sense of shame about being poor. Oh, this one's crazy. I felt a deep shame about being poor, but I also always knew that I was white and it was better to be white.
That was fucking bad.
Let me read that one again.
Yeah.
Still, although working class whites experience classism, they aren't also experiencing racism. I grew up in poverty and felt a deep sense of shame about being poor, but I also knew that I was white and that it was better to be white. So you always knew that. Like, you that was instilled deep into your 4-year-old brain.
Yeah, dude. I didn't know I was white until I didn't know it mattered until I was like 12, 13.
Right.
When your brain actually matures. Unless your parents are telling you you are white and you're different and you're good. By the time you're like, once you're born, then you shouldn't be thinking that way as a kid. You shouldn't recognize your whiteness and know that it's better to be white.
No, I think
nobody thinks
I think
about
most parents try their best to not instill these things in us. I think I think what creates problems is that we insist on speaking about it in this way. It's like I don't know. Like I would really love to know what she thinks that she's accomplishing here. I really don't understand.
Well, like what you mentioned about parenting, most parents have good intentions. But you'll find that in this book, any chance she gets, she will tell you that intention means nothing. And I think like even good parents who have good intentions, she will find that they're still racist because they're white.
Right.
And they are complicit in a system that they have no control over. And so their child will grow up racist no matter how good of parents they are because they are inherently bad. They're inherently evil.
Right.
There's original sin with whiteness. And I think I actually wrote something about intention here. But basically, like, it's just that intention doesn't matter, so we must assume the worst about somebody because there's no alternative. So if I am trying to do something good,
that's a good point.
Like for my black friend.
Yeah.
Let's take an example of something that has nothing to do with race. I have a friend who I won't name who lost all of their hair. On a night we were all dressing up to go see Rocky Horror, I brought her a wig. That would definitely be seen as insensitive by Robin DiAngelo if she was a black person. You know, like if my black friend lost all their hair, that it just fell out in clumps, and I brought them a wig to wear. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, if your friend was black.
If my friend was black, it would be absolutely insensitive for me to bring a wig to them. But this is, all race aside, we went to go see something like Rocky Horror where you're supposed to dress up and look fun and cool and sort of gender bend your identity or whatever. So my intention in that situation, if she were a black friend of mine, would not mean anything. Obviously, my intention there was to make somebody feel more comfortable. I know it's like fresh, but like, let's have fun. Wear this crazy wig that I brought because I've had it for a while and I only used it for a YouTube video a long time ago. You'd look great in it, but that doesn't matter in Robin DiAngelo's world.
No, it doesn't.
What I intend to do, what we as white people intend to do, does not matter.
Right.
If our behavior can be misconstrued as harming somebody, it does harm somebody. So we are without any kind of recompense or any kind of ability to do something right because there is no right. Any behavior that you make can be swayed or can be viewed in a way that is harmful to somebody else. Your intention does not matter.
And anybody that would ascribe to this woman's ideology, it's just like any interaction with black people is going to be so fucking tense. Let me read this other thing here. Consider colorblind ideology from a perspective of a person of color. An example I often share occurred when I was co-leading a workshop with an African-American man. A white participant said to him, "I don't see race. I don't see you as black." My coworker's response was, "Then how will you see racism?" He then explained to her that he was black, explained to her that he was black, he was confident, and that she could see this, and that his race meant that he had a very different experience in life than she did. If she were ever going to understand it or challenge racism, she would need to acknowledge this difference. Pretending that she did not notice that he was black was not helpful to him in any way, as it denied his reality. Indeed, it refused his reality and kept hers insular and unchallenged. This pretense that she did not notice his race assumed that he was just like her, and in so doing, she projected her reality onto him. For example, "I feel welcome at work, so you must too. I have never felt that my race mattered, so you must feel that yours doesn't either. But of course, we do see the race of other people, and race holds deep social meaning for us." There is so much projection in that paragraph, and also she's she didn't ask this black man how he felt. She's saying how this white woman felt when she said that, and she's saying how the black man perceived it. She speaks for everybody except herself. She is the most crazy narcissist. It's really unreal. Like, there is a total personality disorder on full display here. It is like, it's absolutely insane.
And I think it has to do, or do you want to cover this first? The
lists?
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, she has so many. Every chapter has a list, at least one. And it's a useless, repetitive list. And she actually does this in some of the paragraphs where she lists, not like bullet point lists, but she actually creates a run-on sentence with many, many commas that result in her saying something like, and so on.
Yeah.
And when she says and so on, it just means she's run out of examples.
She ran out of gas. Yeah. So this is like a list she's making of things like, so whites enact racism while maintaining a positive self-image in many ways. She says, rationalizing racial segregation as unfortunate but necessary to access good schools. I'm like, okay, yeah, all right. And this next one...
That is an actual institutional problem
Sure.
that we have.
This next one, though, is really simplifying something. So she says, rationalizing that our workplaces are virtually all white because people of color just don't apply. Like, that's not a completely untrue statement. It's not like the fields of STEM are not letting in black applicants. It's just they tend to not apply as much. So it's like it's these gross generalizations that just don't they're not helpful. This one I put in pink because I think it's not a stupid idea.
Yeah.
She says avoiding direct racial language and using racially coded terms such as urban, underprivileged, diverse, sketchy, and good neighborhoods. Which again, like I don't do that, but I do see it done still by dum-dums.
Of
like
course.
So that one, if I were black and someone was calling shit urban, I would get a little annoyed. Next one, denying that we have few cross-racial relationships by proclaiming how diverse our community or workplace is. And so it's like, if it is, then like, does she mean generally? I don't know.
I don't get that one at all.
Attributing inequality between whites and people of color to causes other than racism. And so so let me read that one again. Attributing inequality between whites and people of color to causes other than racism, which means that, again, she is doubling down on she does not want to hear the class argument. She's not interested.
Every instance of inequality between, incidentally, a white person and somebody who is not white is a cause of racism,
Right?
Or by the effect of what racism has caused.
Jacob says, whichever woman wrote this book, I bet she is terrified of blacks. And that's exactly what it is. These people are so scared of black people that the cops that are disproportionately beating up black people, but they're scared of black people. And women like this are also terrified of black people. Let me read this next bit.
Sure.
Another anecdote. Consider a conversation I had with a white friend. She was telling me about a white couple she knew who had just moved to New Orleans and bought a house for a mere $25,000. Of course, she immediately asked, they also had to buy a gun, and Joan is afraid to leave the house. I immediately knew, and this is where she projects. Get ready. I immediately knew they had bought a home in a black neighborhood. This was a moment of white racial bonding between this couple who had shared the story of racial danger and my friend, and then between my friend and me as she repeated the story. Through this tale, the four of us fortified similar images of the horror of black space and drew boundaries between us and them without ever having to directly name race or openly express our disdain for black space. And what's so crazy about this is, like, if you buy a house for not a lot of money and there's a fuckload of home invasions in the area, you can just say that, and that's what they're saying.
It's literally as if she is saying that danger cannot coexist. Danger cannot exist without black people, is what Robin DiAngelo just said.
Yes.
Of course, yeah, they're moving to New Orleans, which is a predominantly black city, but like, take that away, and you have somebody moving to just a neighborhood that has high crime rate. Very poor white people commit a lot of fucking crimes. There's no, like, danger is without race.
It depends on where you are. It's like if you're like in a really methed out, like Bakersfield is, like, tons of like crazy white people doing shit, and it's like, or like really the Inland Empire in general. But because she will not allow race and class to intersect, she'll never get to the point of the matter is like home invasions and violent crime are like statistically more often it's black folks. But because she's unwilling to talk about poverty and how that it affects crime, there's no answers being offered here.
And there's also
no progress.
There's also a fucking gold mine in talking about intersectionality where it matters,
Right.
which is black people are disproportionately poor
Right.
in this country. And so she could absolutely go to town on that issue and figure out ways to solve it, but instead she refuses to mention it at all.
And I'm convinced that she doesn't because it's by design.
Absolutely. Actually, so she, in many of my chapters, she uses the argument that we just used, how class is very important in the intersection of who you are and how you experience life. It is arguably way more important. She uses that as an example of white fragility. When white people talk about class as the real oppressor, they are acting in white fragility.
And I think it's because if we moved away from talking about race and we talked more about class solidarity, she wouldn't have a job.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's what this is. It's a book to sell her services. That's all it is. And her services are really dangerous. And so let me read this next thing.
Sure.
Readers may be asking themselves, but if the neighborhood is really dangerous, why is acknowledging this danger a sign of racism? Research in implicit bias has shown that perceptions of criminal activity are influenced by race. White people
Research in implicit bias has shown that perceptions of criminal activity are influenced by race.
White people will perceive danger simply by the presence of black people. White people will perceive danger simply by the presence of black people. We cannot trust our perceptions when it comes to race and crime, but regardless of whether the neighborhood is actually more or less dangerous than other neighborhoods, what is salient about this exchange is how it functions racially and what that means for the white people engaged in it. This is just insane. It's such an insane way of thinking.
Right. If in her anecdote is obviously so flawed, and all of them are. But like,
and again, like if these people are like talking about it in the way that like you think that they're talking about it, what your friends you're hanging? Like, who the fuck are these people?
Her anecdote is so flawed in that, like, if you and I were to go buy a house, we're obviously going to do the research to know where we're settling. So if we buy a house in a crime-ridden neighborhood, we're going to know it's crime-ridden. Who the fuck? What kind of idiot homeowner or future homeowner doesn't look into the neighborhood they're buying a house?
Of course. But what I'm really convinced of though is that none of these anecdotes happen. This is her inner dialogue. And she's like a very sick, racist person.
If we have, I mean, all of these anecdotes and this entire book is evidence that she is out of her goddamn mind, and that like the reality that she has constructed is so far removed because it's so subjective, which she admits to. She admits that every person is subjective and their realities are completely separate from others. She admits to that, but that totally invalidates every argument that she makes because it's not rooted in reality. It's rooted in her personal experiences per every anecdote we get every chapter.
And so I wanted to read this next part because this shows just how this shows the hypocrisy and also the type of person that she is. So I hate this idea that like and I won't let cunts like this take it away from us. This country voted for Barack Obama twice. Mm-hmm. Like that was proof. That was proof that we were moving in the right direction. I mean, like, I don't care. I'm not talking about what he did once he was president.
Won by majority each time, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he won, I think, both times it was quite a bit.
It wasn't like 50-51 or like 50-51-49. It was like when he was against Romney, wasn't it like 64-36?
I don't remember, but it was, Romney did not do well. But so this is what I want to, so this is back to her. She says, many in this generation claim the election of Barack Obama as president shows that we are post-racial. These polls were conducted before the presidency of Donald Trump, but as his election has made it clear, we are far from being post-racial. So it's if the guy's not on your team, so that proves that we're in a race. Not that Hillary Clinton didn't talk to the working class at all.
Right.
Like and so didn't travel to any of these poor white areas that vote. But again, because she cannot talk about class, she everything's just, it's race. Everything's race in her crazy little brain. And so she will never understand why Donald Trump was elected in the first place. She'll never understand.
There's also this mirage of of what progression looks like.
Right.
And us electing Barack Obama twice, well, what's next is going to be a black woman or a woman in a wheelchair or
Right.
a woman in a hijab.
Right.
It's like that was what was expected in her reality because that is what progress looks like to
Right.
her. When really progress does not have a face, it doesn't have a name. Us electing Donald Trump, and by us I mean the fucking U.S., not us personally. Us electing Donald Trump is not a regression. It is a direct response to the progress that we thought Obama made.
It is a direct. The election of Donald Trump was a direct response to the 2008 financial crisis, where no one went to jail, and everyone lost their fucking homes, and everyone became and the economic growth after that point was fucking slow as shit, and people were fucking poor, and Hillary thought it was so in the bag for her. She didn't travel to any of these white working class areas and talk to these people, even if it was like Trump where he's just lying. So like, and like that's, but a lot of times, I mean, like most people in this country just need the carnival barker that tells them what they want to hear. And he did that. And so it's not a mystery that he got elected at all, but to someone like this, it is, because she does not understand that poverty influences a lot of people's decisions, whether it be crime or how they choose to vote. And so if the guy's telling you that he's going to bring your job back in coal mining, even though he never will, but if you believe him and it's what your family has been doing for the last 100 years, like, you're going to vote for him, regardless of whatever he says that may be racist or perceived to be racist. Let me read this last part here. I'm often asked if I think the younger generation is less racist. No, I don't. In some ways, racism's adaptations over time are more sinister than the concrete rules such as Jim Crow. I'm going to read that again.
Holy fuck.
I am often asked if I think the younger generation is less racist. No, I don't. In some ways, racism's adaptations over time are more sinister than the concrete rules such as Jim Crow.
What she's saying is that we as white people, and luckily we're white gays, so we're a little bit redeemable.
Yeah, but
but like what she's saying here is that we are complicit in a more racist system than Jim Crow ever was.
Right.
What the fuck?
Like, yeah.
And that somehow de facto racism is more insidious and evil than concrete de jure racism.
It's insane.
Racism that is written into legislation is somehow less racist than what we have today.
Right.
If we are to secede and say that racism is very prevalent today, and it could very well be depending on how you define it.
It exists. I mean, we're not denying it exists. It does exist.
I know, but based on the definitions that she puts forth,
yeah.
If we are to use her definition, we are in a much less racist society than we were when we had Jim Crow.
It's absolutely an insane thought.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The adaptations produce the same outcome. People of color are blocked from moving forward, but have been put in a place by a dominant white society that won't or can't admit to its beliefs. That is, again, it's so, she's talking about herself.
Yeah.
How do you say that word?
Intransigence.
Intransigence results in another pillar of white fragility, the refusal to know.
Yes, the refusal to know. That is probably the biggest part of her idea of white fragility. It is refusing to recognize that what you may have done is harmful.
Oh, this one's insane too. Okay, so this chapter is called Belonging, or this thing. I was born into a culture in which I belonged, racially. Indeed, the forces of racism were shaping me even before I took my first breath. Insane.
Uh-huh.
If I were born in a hospital, regardless of the decade in which I was born, any hospital would be open to me because my parents were white. God damn it, she's crazy. If my parents attended a childbirth preparation class, the instructor was most likely to be white. The videos they watched in class were most likely depicted white people, and their fellow classmates with whom they built connections and community were also most likely white. And I want to get to this next part. She says, conversely, the people who cleaned my mother's hospital room, did the laundry, cooked and cleaned in the cafeteria, and maintained the facilities were most likely people of color. So she's assuming when she was a little peanut person with no perception of her surroundings they must have, the people cleaning, this is like the Kelly Osbourne thing. You know, if you deport all the Mexicans, who's going to clean your toilet? And everyone's like, ugh. This is her doing the same thing.
That is so funny.
Like, the janitorial staff must have been black people.
Look, she brings up an anecdote that is entirely hypothetical in, I think, chapter 9. Let's see. Yeah. I think it's in chapter 9. She brings up a hypothetical. She's like, look, let's just say that you work in a microcosm of a school. And within those schools, this is Pierre Bourdieu. This is what I was going to talk about.
Yeah.
So Pierre Bourdieu is a philosopher. I believe he's French.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, Bourdieu. He talks about something called habitus, which is a pretty common idea in philosophy. I didn't know who Bourdieu was when I started reading this book, but a quick cursory Google search helped me pretty clearly understand what his deal was. Bourdieu talks about something called habitus, which is it primarily addresses this idea that your thoughts, your actions, your behaviors, the things that you like and dislike, are all crafted by what your habitation is. You know, what you're surrounded by. The environment that you live in sort of forms your identity of things that you like. It dictates what kind of art you like and what kind of art you make. Excuse me, my throat got a little bit too moist there because I was foaming at the mouth over this idea. Because it's chapter 7. In this chapter, she lists Bourdieu as this great philosopher of racial studies and applies it to her own theory, when the entire time Bourdieu is writing about habitus, he's talking about class, and that is explicit in his writing. He wrote.
She has to ignore it. She just has to.
She has to. So I wrote, habitus primarily addresses class, and it also is explained to not be inherent, but instead learned. Whereas all of and that's in reference to you learn how you should live your life if you're from a rich family or if you're from a poor family and you have to struggle to get food.
Sure.
That is what dictates your habitus, your habits and what you do and what you like.
Of course.
She literally completely ignores that and says that your habitus is inherent because you're white. Because you are white, you will act a certain way. You'll like a certain kind of art. You'll enjoy rock and roll music instead of, traditionally black music. You know
what's so crazy is how much that sounds like Jared Taylor, the white nationalist.
That is exactly it.
Really his point is just like I don't want to kill black people, but his whole thing, but I want to just be separate from them. And his language sounds so much like that. Mm-hmm. Like how she talks.
So on my Google search of Bourdieu, he one of the major pitfalls that is listed on the first website that I clicked into about Bourdieu is that one of the major pitfalls that non-academics fall into is saying that habitus is inherent instead of learned. That is the biggest pitfall that people often get into when they try to cite Bourdieu. His name is Pierre Bourdieu, if anybody wants to look him up. That is the biggest pitfall that non-academics or people who are just doing very shallow research on him fall into.
Right.
Because they want it to fit their narrative.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what... And it filled me... It made my blood boil when I, all I had to do was a quick Google search to find out who Bourdieu was.
And to find out that she's molding... She's just molding a narrative so that she can... to validate her job. Let me read some more crazy shit real quick.
Sure. I have another. I want to finish up that anecdote about the school thing. Sorry. I mean, we could do this first, but so the anecdote I was talking about existing in a school, the microcosm, is that your habitus is dictated by your environment. Your field is what she calls it, and in that there are subfields I think called spaces that Bourdieu talks about. She uses this to create a hypothetical where there's a school secretary at the front desk of the school, and then there's a janitor who exists in the boiler room of the school. And in this hypothetical, she's like, because things are the way that they are, the secretary is obviously a white woman, and the janitor is obviously a black man. And I'm like, upon what grounds?
Yeah.
Are you just gonna say that because you've only known black male janitors, and white female secretaries? You are the person who is in charge of this racist seminar thing to make change so that these stereotypes, these things can actually change. And so we can have, I don't know, white female janitors if they want to be a janitor, and we can have a black male secretary at the desk. It's like, but her hypothetical is even racist.
Right.
That she has constructed this reality in her head that's like, even my imaginary scenarios are going to fall into stereotypes.
Yep.
And she says that, like, if the black janitor needs to come upstairs to the front desk, that the white female secretary will act differently around him because she is unfamiliar with him.
Again, this is just all her projections.
Exactly.
So strap in.
Yes, let's do it.
I may feel inadequate in light of my age or weight, but I will belong racially. For example, in 2017, singer Rihanna introduced a makeup line for women of all skin colors. Gratitude from women of color poured in. Many of their tweets included the exclamation, "Finally, these are tweets I have never needed to send." And it's like, okay, so you're judging, you're deciding that this was a problem based on a Twitter moment. You're basing your thesis off of Twitter. So, like, you're a moron. So that's not the crazy one yet, but hang on. And then I have another thing highlighted that says, in virtually every situation or context deemed normal, neutral, or prestigious in society, I belong racially.
Jesus Christ.
So strap in for this. For example, I was invited to the retirement party of a white friend. The party was a potluck picnic held in a public park. As I walked down the slope toward the picnic shelters, I noticed two parties going on side by side. Our gathering was primarily composed of white people, and the other appeared to be all black people. I experienced a sense of disequilibrium as I approached and had to choose which party was my friend's. I felt a sense of mild anxiety as I considered that I might have to enter the all-black group. Then mild relief as I realized that my friend was in the other group. This relief was amplified as I thought that I might have mistakenly walked over to the black party. All these thoughts and feelings happened in just a few seconds, but they were a rare moment of racial self-awareness. The mere possibility that I might have to experience not belonging racially was enough to raise a racial discomfort. It is rare for me to experience a sense of not belonging racially, and these are usually very temporary, easily avoidable situations. Indeed, throughout my life, I have been warned that I should avoid situations in which I might be a racial minority. These situations are often presented as a scary, dangerous, or sketchy, yet if the environment or situation is viewed as good, nice, or valuable, I can be confident that as a white person, I will be seen as racially belonging there.
That is so scary.
She's absolutely an insane person.
And this is another trope that she is interchangeable with somebody who is a literal grand wizard of the KKK. It's like, her thoughts there are obviously racist.
Yes.
And it's like, you cannot dispute that. But if you were to put this into Jared Taylor's book, if he has one, I don't know. But like, if you were to put that, it's completely interchangeable. You could take a paragraph from his and put it in here, and likewise with hers and his.
Right.
It's just so, yes, she is self-aware of, racial self-awareness is what she calls it, but really it's being racist.
Yeah, and like what's so interesting is, like, you said it could read like a Jared Taylor or like a white nationalist thing. That guy James Lindsay that I always tweet, I like him a lot. They played a hoax where they created these fake articles, and one of the ones that they got accepted was they took quotes from Mein Kampf and replaced Jews with white men, and it got accepted. Like,
that's insanity.
And that's kind of what this kind of is. It's like
aren't they the ones who talked about consenting dogs or something like that?
Yeah.
James Lindsay was part of that.
And also
group,
like
trio.
fat bodybuilding was another one they did.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, let me get this one here. Raised in a culture of white supremacy, I exude a deeply internalized assumption of racial superiority.
Jesus Christ.
She's so fucking crazy. Having to navigate white people's internalized assumption of racial superiority is a great psychic drain for people of color, but I have no need to concern myself with that.
Christ, dude.
Here's another one. Another way that my life has been shaped by being white is that my race is held up as the norm for humanity. Whites are just people. Our race is rarely, if ever, named. Think about how often white people mention the race of a person if they are not white. My black friend, the Asian woman, because there are less of them. It's an amazing fucking descriptor. Like, again, it's like there's no way. My friend Mikey, who's black, it would be hard to describe Mikey. It just gets the thing done quickly.
And it's like,
Like if someone
It's
like
like-
Jordan, the gay one, it's fine. Like it's totally fine. I don't care at all.
And it's if there isn't like exactly, that's exactly it. So like if you were to describe even just me, like I mean of course if you were to describe like, well, he has longer brown hair and he's got green eyes, I'm identifiable as white if those are the characteristics, or like light eyes, and you could say something like he has light skin. But if you are describing somebody in the same way who is black, it's like that could be any fucking like this will sound racist, but like it's like if you were to describe somebody who's tall, has brown hair, brown eyes, and like a tattoo on the inside of their wrist, you have no idea what the race of that person is. And if you were looking for them, there's no way to know who you're looking for. I don't know. It's just like we could just say he's a white dude with brown hair and green eyes. Yep. You could identify me that way, but it's just identifiable,
Yep. There's something I want to do. This is another one. So this is like also how myopic her worldview is. Here she says, to use an example from school, consider the writers we are all expected to read. The list usually includes Ernest Hemingway, John Steinbeck, Charles Dickens, Fyodor Dostoevsky, Mark Twain, Jane Austen, and William Shakespeare. These writers are all seen as representing the universal human experience, and we read them precisely because they are presumed to be able to speak for us all, or to us all, rather. Now consider the writers we turn to during events promoting diversity, events such as Multicultural Authors Week and Black History Month. These writers usually include Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Amy Tan, and Sandra Cisneros. We go to these writers for the black or Asian perspective. Toni Morrison is always seen as a black writer, not just a writer. This is your projection. Okay. But when we are not looking for the black or Asian perspective, we return to white writers, reinforcing the idea of whites as just human and people of color as particular kinds of racialized of humans. This also allows white male writers to be seen as not having an agenda or any particular perspective, while racialized and gendered writers do. And like that's the thing is like, I don't really think she knows who Alexander Dumas was. He wrote Three Musketeers. He's black.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
She doesn't know that. I really don't think she knows who that is. And again, too, it's like
she is obviously like cherry picking the things that we read, but she is exactly what she claims to not want to be. She is the white female writer who is speaking about the black experience.
When she's pretending that there are no black fiction writers.
I know. Fucking insane.
And like so again, it's like she shapes everything through the lens of like, because these are the reason why she made this list like this. This is the only black writers that she knows of.
It's so funny that it includes like household names like Maya Angelou and James Baldwin.
Right.
You're right, because she has no idea.
And what
who
they chose to
anybody
write
else
about
is.
was race primarily. So like James Baldwin did a bit more shit, but like.
And it's almost as if you were white, you probably shouldn't be writing about the black experience, which she seems to do a lot here.
See, this is even worth. Oh, okay. As a white person, I can openly and unabashedly reminisce about the good old days. Romanticized collections of the past and calls for return to former ways are a function of white privilege, which manifests itself in the ability to remain oblivious to our racial history. Claiming that the past was socially better than the present is also a hallmark of white supremacy. And it's just like...
Do people do that? Do people claim that the past was better?
No, I mean, but that's the thing. It's such a generalized statement. It's like, but and again, because she views everything through the lens of race, that if someone said, oh, like back in the day, this, and that, it could be about like, Pepsi was only 25 cents. It's like, you only think about that because you don't care about black people during, and it's like, I wasn't talking about that, you fucking lunatic. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. How far are we into this?
I think I'm on the fourth.
I mean, like in the quotes
fourth,
that we're reading.
The fourth. I'm the fourth chapter.
Me. Yeah. Oh, there's an interesting anecdote that she actually talks about that completely invalidates the experience of other people of color. And she was doing I want to talk about this because I feel like it's important to who the fuck she thinks she is.
Right.
But she's talking about an anecdote where she's doing a seminar and a white person who's an activist, but an actual one who actually helps like people of color who are suffering from alcoholism and like housing crises, particularly Native Americans. This white woman objects to a certain part of the or at the end of the seminar, objects to a certain part of it because it did not mention the experience of other people of color. And Robin DiAngelo completely wipes that away. She literally, like, so it's a strange, I wrote that, like, on page 282, it's a strange fantasy with no conclusion, showing that there's a hypothetical and imaginary Native American people who are more comforting and inclusive than all white faculty. Sorry, this is the wrong anecdote. There is, actually, do you want to actually flip to page 282 so I can remember what I'm talking about here?
Shit.
It's just down here. You can just, you can actually, like, flip with the arrow keys on the keyboard.
Okay, because I don't really want to lose where I am, though, but...
I'll remember the number, 157. So there are several anecdotes.
282?
Yeah, there are several anecdotes or two about Native Americans, but one is which in which the white lady objects to a certain part because the seminar didn't address the experiences of other people of color enough. And I thought, well, of course that's what it is, because Robin DiAngelo is so fixated on the black experience that she has no regard for any other person of color in this book at all. Let's see. There was something about Native Americans. Maybe it's on the page before or something. But it's about, like, a person speaking up against the seminar because it's just not inclusive enough towards other people of color. I don't even think I can find it in all these words. But there's a second one where there's an anecdote of a Native American man or a Native American tribe welcoming in a white person early on in history, and then that Native American tribe telling the white person to buck up and like succumb to it because this is the way of life. I'm sorry that you feel that this is a brutal way of life, but this is just how it is, and you need to suck it up. But the next anecdote after that, or the hypothetical after that, is like white people saying that to black people and how that's any different. It's
right.
Like, and so, like, clearly if you have a Native American tribe who takes in a white person, or maybe like a journalist or something, they're gonna feel it's such a stark change in their lifestyle that they're gonna feel like an outsider.
Right.
I wish I could find it, or maybe our pages are different or something, but it's just such like it was 156, I think.
Yeah.
But anyways, like, the Native American thing was like, her book is so hyper focused on the black experience that it doesn't even think to consider that there are other denominations in this world.
She fetishizes black people.
Exactly.
I mean, completely.
I think that's the point I kind of wanted to get to, but I was running in circles doing that.
I mean, I wish I knew what happened to you, to Robin DiAngelo. Like, what happened to you?
Yeah.
So this is kind of a weird thing where she says things that are dumb and some things that are true. Because people of color are not seen as racially innocent, they are expected to speak issues of race, but must do so on white terms. It's like, again, like she's so certain about the way she talks about things. Mm-hmm. And again, it's like, this is so, like, it's so ignoring the individual. It's insane. This idea that racism is not a white problem enables us to sit back and let people of color take very real risks of invalidation and retaliation as they share their experiences. But we are not required to take similar cross-racial tasks. They, not we, have race, and thus they are the holders of racial knowledge. In this way, we position ourselves as standing outside a hierarchical social relations. So this next one, she makes sense. So white flight may be seen as another aspect of white racial innocence, as it is often justified by the beliefs of people of color, again, especially black people, are more prone to crime, and that if too many black people move into a neighborhood, crime will increase, home values will go down, and neighborhoods will deteriorate. For example, in a study of race and perceptions of crime conducted by sociologists Heather Johnson and Thomas Shapiro, white families consistently discussed fear of crime and associated crime with people of color. In their minds, the more people of color in an area, specifically blacks and Latinos, the more dangerous the area is perceived to be. This is true. That's like a fine one. But then next, she says this. Deeply held white associations of black people with crime distort reality and the actual discretion of danger that has historically existed between whites and blacks. The vast history of extensive and brutal explicit violence perpetrated by whites and their ideological rationalization are all trivialized through white claims of racial innocence. The power we now wield and have wielded for centuries is thus obscured. So she's also, so like through doing this, she ignores that crime statistics do not reflect this reality. Like she can't believe that the world has changed in 60 years. Like she really can't. Because again, it wouldn't.
Have we even talked about exactly what white fragility is yet?
It's just basically
it is acting defensive when you are confronted about what you have done may be perceived as harmful towards people of color or towards black people more specifically.
This is a good point she made too. So this chapter is called the good and bad binary, and basically what she's talking about if like she's trying to blur the lines of what's good or bad. It's insane. But she had a point here that I think is pretty accurate. Because this one pisses me off all the time. That she goes these. So let me get to some of the context. You cannot be a good person and participate in racism. Only bad people were racist. These images of black persecution in the South during the civil rights movement of the 1960s also allowed Northern whites to position racists as always Southern. And that's a good point. Like, I really hate that stereotype of like all racists are Southern bumbling rednecks. It's stupid and it's reductive. And,
right. The North was actually pretty complicit in racism and actually did not view it in a moral way. They actually had some of the like most prolific slave ports in the North. So like it's a fallacy that the North was less racist than the South. The South just fucking utilized the resources that the North provided.
Yes, exactly. Let's see. And has anyone of you been to Boston lately? It's like Jesus fucking Christ, most racist people on the planet.
Oh well, I think they're all Irish. Irish fucks.
She says in this next bit, if you are white and have ever been challenged to look at your own racism, perhaps you told a problematic joke or made a prejudiced assumption and someone brought it to your attention. It is common to feel defensive. This is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to get.
If you believe that you are being told you are a bad person, all your energy is likely to go towards denying the possibility and validating the messenger rather than trying to understand why what you said or done is hurtful. And again, it's like because she's so focused on the racial lens, she holds black people to this degree in which they couldn't indict you with the term of racism and be wrong because you're white. So and that's crazy, and it's also really fucking racist. You will probably respond with white fragility, but ultimately white fragility can only protect the problematic behavior you feel so defensive about. It does not demonstrate that you are an open person who has no problematic racial behavior.
Right. In one of my chapters, she talks about the rules of engaging a white racist. And she talks about how all of these are completely unavoidable but shouldn't exist in the first place. And some of those rules of engagements, they're like prerequisites for how you should tell somebody that they're racist, but you shouldn't abide by these because it's counterproductive to ameliorating racism or whatever. She talks about some of the rules or the requirements of the prereqs include a pre-established trust between the white person and the black person, an issue-free friendship, which is like you have never had any conflict with that person in your life whatsoever. You've never, maybe they let their dog poop on your yard and they didn't pick it up. It's like, if that has happened, that is a rule. Like, if you were to bring up like something racist that they actually did, the white person will point to, well, this has to be about that time that I accidentally let my dog shit on your yard. And it's like,
who is this hypothetical person?
Exactly. It's like, this is so a white person, according to Robin DiAngelo, is going to point at things other than racism to excuse their behavior or whatever. But really, all I think that is telling me that these prereqs for engaging in like a conversation, in a racial conversation with a white person, the prereqs really just tell me that like Robin DiAngelo has no relationships that are built upon trust or issue-free relationships.
This next bit that I have highlighted sums it up pretty well.
Yeah.
She says, someone who claims to have been taught to treat everyone the same is simply telling me that he or she doesn't understand socialization. It is not possible to teach someone to treat everyone the same. We can be told and often are told to treat everyone the same, but we cannot successfully be taught to do so because human beings are not objective.
She says almost that exact thing in one of my first
She says the same shit over and over again.
Yeah.
This next bit, she says, yet when the topic is race, we claim that it is completely inoperative if there is any level of fond regard. An even more ludicrous form of reality, we even go as far as to claim that racial conditioning disappears if we can calmly walk by people of color on the streets of large cities. And it's like,
oh my God.
Again, it's like this hypothetical person she creates is so ridiculous. In this next one, many whites believe that if they are not talking about racism with their friends of color, or if their friends are not giving them feedback about racism, then racism is a non-issue. Because it is. It's like, that's the thing. Like, so every relationship I have with a black person, we have to just talk about race all the fucking time.
Right, exactly.
It's insane. Like, and also, like, my black friends don't want to fucking, like, who'd want that? Like, you know, when people, and again, I like never comparing the two things, but like when people want to talk to me about being gay, I'm just like,
we don't have to do that.
We don't have to do this. Like,
the thing is, like, that is reductive of who you are as a person.
Yes.
It's like, being gay is one of the least important things about me. Maybe it determines how I come, but like, in the grand sense, like, I am at my core, like, an artist. I'm a student. I make clothes. Like, there are things about you that are much more important than your inherent characteristics.
Right.
But, and we've definitely said this on the podcast before, because it's such a, it's a thing between people who sort of think like us. It's like, there are more important things about you.
It's why we started this podcast in the fucking first place.
There are more important things about you than what you cannot change.
Right. This the last bit. She says, but just because you and your friend don't talk about racism does not mean it isn't at play. Indeed, this silence is one of the ways that racism is manifest, for it is an imposed silence, and I completely reject that line of thinking. That shit has like really crept up like during this whole moment, and it's sick, it's deranged, it's wrong, it's racist. So anyway,
right. I think just like the ideology is that people who talk like Robin DiAngelo, Dr. Robin DiAngelo, think that they will say something like, you are black and that makes you special. Right. It's like, but that's exactly what we were taught not to believe for so long, and what was supposed to be sort of post-racial.
And then that black woman who wrote the article about this book, the one in Slate.
Lauren Michelle Jackson,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
She was like, that's basically what she was saying. She was like, people like Robin DiAngelo view us as simple but like wise. She has like this perception of black people that they're simple but they're wise, which is like, again, just her fetishizing of the whole thing. Strap in for this one.
Oh God.
She says, focusing on race is what divides us. The idea that talking about racism is itself racist has always struck me as odd. It is rooted in the concept that race doesn't matter. Thus, to talk about it gives it undeserved weight. Many things that we talk about every day don't really matter. Precisely because these topics of conversation don't matter, they are easy to talk about. We know race matters a great deal, but for many of the reasons already discussed, we feel the need to deny it its importance. Ironically, this denial is a fundamental way in which white people maintain unequal racial power. She's the fuck. It's like crazy now that I'm rereading it. I'm like really remembering how fucking crazy she is.
Yeah, fuck, dude.
Gio says Dr. Robin Goebbels.
Oh my God. That is, it starts to sound that way when you read so much of this. And we only each read half.
Right.
And we're already fed up with it. I don't think I could sit through a whole book of repetitive thinking.
I'm on my last chapter here, so let me just get through what I have here. So this chapter is called Anti-Blackness. It's short, fortunately. In this chapter, I will address the uniquely anti-black sentiment integral to white identity. God. If
you identify as white, if you identify as white, you have a unique anti-black sentiment.
Yes.
It is integral to who you are as a white person.
Yep.
You are anti-black, is what she's saying.
In doing so, I do not wish to minimize the racism that other groups of color experience, but she does constantly. However, I believe that in the white mind, black people are the ultimate racial other. And we must grapple with this relationship, for it is a fundamental aspect of the racial socialization underlying white fragility. I remind my readers that I am addressing white people at the societal level. I have friends who are black and whom I love deeply. You don't. Neither of those things are true. That she just said. And I'm going back to her now.
They don't love you deeply because you talk and act this way.
You scare the shit out of them. And you're exhausting.
You're more racist than any racist person.
I do not have to suppress feelings of hatred and contempt as I sit with them. I see their humanity. But on the macro level, I also recognize that the deep anti-black feelings that have been inculcated in me since childhood. I also recognize the deep anti-black feelings that have been inculcated in me since childhood. These feelings surface immediately. In fact, before I can even think, when I conceptualize black people in general. The sentiments arise when I pass black strangers on the street, see stereotypical depictions of black people in the media, and hear the thinly veiled warnings and jokes passed around between white people. These are the deeper feelings that I need to be willing to examine, for these feelings can add up, can and do seep out without my awareness and hurt those whom I love. Because you're a fucking racist.
Look, like she is, obviously she's talked about it so much, she is hyper aware of her racism and yet refuses to, I don't know, fucking change it.
Yeah.
Because she just admits that it's part of her white experience.
Yeah.
That because she's white, she will always feel this way.
Right.
That's awful and racist.
And the only antidote to this problem is to have her go to her seminar.
Exactly.
Which is the point.
Exactly. And in the last chapter of the book, chapter 12, she talks about there's like 2.5 full pages of her just groveling in this anecdote of her like screwing up so bad and like making that joke about that person, about the black person's hair, to a new black friend of hers, or a new black coworker of hers. I mean, her like groveling and being like, I am still so racist and I have so much to learn. And it's like, because of the standards that you've set for yourself, you'll never not be racist. No. You will always slip up and make a microaggression towards a black person, because this is what you do as somebody who is constantly thinking this way. You will always tiptoe around black people, and even if you make the slightest misstep, if you make a joke that may have been misinterpreted as insensitive, you will literally send them an email, invite them to a meeting, a private meeting between just the two of you, and apologize deeply and profoundly and be like, I'm so sorry, I was insensitive to your people's hair. And then at the end of that apology, be like, have I missed anything? Is there anything else I should apologize for?
Right.
That is exactly what she said in this anecdote for like 2.5 pages for the last chapter. And it's so...
And consequently,
gross.
No relationship with a black person is going to be genuine that you have.
That is exactly it. She won't... her 2 coworkers that she does these seminars with, the IT girl who happens to be a black woman, she will never build profound and meaningful relationships with anybody who is of color because of the way she thinks.
And the crazy thing too is it's like, I think what she fails to recognize, and like this is how I conduct my life, is like, if I like my relationships with my black friends, if they were like offended about me talking about their hair, the friendship's over. Like that's too much fucking work to be around you. And like this isn't about you being black. This is about you being indoctrinated into a cult, which is what this is like. That you should take. You need to be the victim over something that is so inconsequential. It's a really sick and pervasive thing. So she says here, in 2018, affirmative action has been all but dismantled. It's like, no, what are you talking about? Anyway, yet invariably, I will encounter a white male bristling with umbrage who raises the issue of affirmative action. It seems that we white people just cannot let go of our outrage over how unfair this toothless attempt to rectify centuries of injustice has been to us. And the umbrage consistently surfaces in overwhelmingly white leadership groups that have asked me to come in and help them recruit and retain more people of color. Who are these people? Who... Like, and honestly, too, like, if these people are real, like, I've never met this person before. It's a very specific person that talks about affirmative action negatively, but they're usually just like, you know what I mean? Yeah. But if these people are existing on the corporate level, there's a sickness in corporations that you should be calling these people out by name. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not gonna, if someone has that thought in their brain, you're not gonna fix it. Like, and so I don't know. I want to get through this and just be done. Hang on.
Yeah. I've said most of what I need to say about my chapters, but there are some final thoughts that I do want to get to that I wrote down.
She wrote another fucking list, and it's absolutely fucking insane. This is the end of the anti-blackness chapter, so I'm just going to get through this real quick. She says, white people are the saviors of black. These are okay, let me read the context. So she's talking about a film that she likes. This film, told from the white perspective and enthusiastically received by audiences, reinforces some very important. So she didn't like the film. Sorry, some very important dominant ideologies. So these are ideologies she thinks are dominant and also bad. So keep that in mind. White people are the saviors of black people. What a fucking projection that is.
Yeah.
She says some black children may be innocent, but black adults are morally and criminally corrupt. Okay. Whites who are willing to save or otherwise help black people at seemingly great personal costs are noble, courageous, and morally superior to other whites. Yeah. Individual black people can overcome their circumstances, but usually only with the help of white people. Black neighborhoods are inherently dangerous and criminal. Virtually all blacks are poor, incompetent, and unqualified for their jobs. They belong to gangs, are addicted to drugs, and are bad parents. The most dependable route for black males is to escape the inner city is through sports. And that one really caught my eye because it's not white people saying that. It's black people. Like that stereotype in the black community of like becoming an athlete or a fucking hip hop star, that ain't us. That is like deeply ingrained in like a cultural difference that I'm not going to tell you to change it, but you guys don't like, there's no black leadership that seems to want to address it. Obama did quite a bit, but it was not received well. This last one, white people are willing to deal with individual deserving black people, but whites do not become a part of the black community in any meaningful way beyond charity work.
What's beyond charity work? How do you become a part of the black community beyond charity work? If you are trying to help a black community, what does that mean? Do you put on blackface to become part of the community? What is it?
You just are a normal person around black people, which she is.
But that's the thing. She makes it so impossible to be a normal person around black people because of what she wants us to do.
Yeah. So this last bit, and then I'm done. White racial socialization engenders many conflicting feelings towards African Americans: benevolence, resentment, superiority, hatred, guilt, roil barely below the surface and erupt at the slightest breach, yet can never be explicitly acknowledged. Our need to deny the bewildering manifestations of anti-blackness that reside so close to the surface makes us irrational, and the irrationality is the heart of white fragility and the pain it causes people of color. I don't really have commentary. It's just an insane. Again, it's this hypothetical person that I think it's her subconscious talking. She's writing from her own subconscious. Like she's a very sick, very sick woman. She's a very, very sick woman.
She absolutely is.
Yeah.
I was the one to read the next 6 chapters. I don't have any direct quotes or too many direct quotes. I only have a few really from my chapters, and I wasn't able to bring my computer and show you guys my quotes or read them directly. But in my chapters, it is of course all cyclical and circular. But I think like I might just give like a few final closing thoughts.
Sure.
There's one quote that stands out particular to me, and this is from the last chapter, and the last chapter is called "Where Do We Go From Here?" And that's the last chapter of every fucking academic novel.
Yeah.
Academia novel. I mean, I don't mean like any actual. I said academic novel. I don't think I meant to say that, but it's kind of what it is. It's a novel. One quote that I think is like, "This is how we fix it." She wrote that she cannot erase her whiteness. She will forever be a white woman. But what she can do to fix this is strive to be less white. That is a direct quote. I can strive to be less white.
What the fuck does that even mean?
That is, yeah, I know.
Especially through the lens through which she views the world.
I know. It's fucking insane that she even wrote that, first of all. But like, I think what's important is like, there's no way to be less white. You can make it so that you benefit less from actual institutional problems that more so benefit white people than black people because of the disproportionate, poverty line and stuff like that. But it's just being less white, I guess, is the conclusion here. And not to mention that there are 2 sections in the final chapter that are titled "In Conclusion." It's "In Conclusion" on like page 370 something or 360 something. There's that section. There's another section, and then after that it says "In Conclusion" on like page like 370 whatever. I'm like, come on, when the fuck will it end? But I think she just had a bad editor and forgot to fucking truncate. But there's a large theme in this book that's it has to do with like all relationships between white and black people, and that regardless of the nature of the relationship, whether you are a white person married to a black man or you are colleagues with somebody, or you are in like a relationship, or you have a friendship with or you just have a friendship with a black person, that there is this inexplicable power dynamic between the two of you, regardless of what your relationship to that black person is. Excuse me. Even if I were to marry a black man, I am still benefiting from our racial dynamic in some way. And so really what I like took from that is like, yes, there are serious problems within our government, within our legislation, that disproportionately affect black people, like busing to schools and poverty lines. But like individual white people with good, even activistic intentions are completely erased in her narrative, because that doesn't matter.
Except for
because
her.
You are because you are white and you have this original sin. You can never have a non-racial relationship with a black person.
It's a cult.
It is. I want to get to one more thing before I have like an actual final thought on it, and it's that like there is one good takeaway I think from this.
Okay.
And it has very little.
I was waiting for this because you didn't tell me what it was.
It has very little to do with race, but what she talks about with white fragility, it's a defensiveness that keeps you from looking inward, and it keeps you from introspection. And I think introspection, of course, is something that we should all strive for, because introspection is the opposite of, defensiveness. And when you are defensive, you burn relationships, and you don't accept any blame for anything. If I were to let my dog shit on your lawn and not pick it up, and refuse to accept the blame for that, when I could have easily picked it up, and I totally disrespected you by doing so, if you were to bring that up to me, the right thing to do is to accept that you did something wrong.
Right.
In any relationship that you have with any friend or marriage, or even even a colleague, if you did something objectively wrong to them, even if you didn't mean to, being defensive will just burn that relationship. It'll make it worse. You'll have a harder time connecting to that person. But looking inward and accepting blame for things in non-racial relationships, or this is completely separate from race, but like looking inward and accepting blame for something will help you better yourself and better your relationship with somebody else. And I wish she went to a more generalized idea of fragility, because I think fragility is an important thing to focus on when you are trying to build relationships with other people. You'll never be a whole human being if you can't look inward and fix the problems that you have with yourself.
And the most fragile people I know are the ones that are unwilling to listen to ideas that challenge theirs, which are people like her.
Right.
Like, she had to create a framework through which you're a fragile white person if her ideas are challenged.
Mm-hmm. But I think, like, more importantly, and she never touches on it, is like, generally your relationships with other people depend on your ability to accept that you are a flawed person, that all people are flawed, and that you should trust that your friend won't become defensive if you bring up an issue with them.
Right.
That's a good relationship with somebody.
Yep.
And I think that's something good you can take away from the idea of just fragility, not white fragility, just fragility. And also, earlier on in the book, she talks about how white fragility cannot be compared to any other kind of fragility. There's no such thing as student fragility.
Again, she has to make her... It's all these steel mans just to set up to just have her thing not get challenged.
Yeah, she cannot accept any challenge to argument or any existence of any other kind of fragility because it doesn't exist. She has to claim that it does not exist. But I kind of want to move on to final thoughts. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm done.
So really, like, what this book is, White Fragility is the white femme progressive's wet dream.
Yep.
It's the end-all be-all of being complicit with racism, and reading the final chapter will help you solve your inner turmoil about benefiting from racist structures.
Right.
After reading this book, there is no more work to be done if you are a white femme progressive.
Right.
And by femme, I mean feminine. I don't mean female. I mean, like, the submissive nature of feminine, it's the like, you are always right as a black person. You always have the superiority over me because I've benefited so much from these systems, and I recognize that. It's like, this is And it's like that picture I retweeted and said, like, I'm losing my goddamned mind, as Shakespeare once said.
Mm-hmm.
It is that picture of 10 or 12 white people on a Zoom meeting holding up their White Fragility book and like giving a thumbs up and the big open mouthed smile at the camera. It's like
look how I'm a good white.
I'm a good white and I've fixed my own racism.
Right.
That is what this book is meant to be. It
Yep.
is talking to the white femme progressives of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It is doing nothing more because it is not effective in any way to mobilize people to act differently, to actually help their black friends, because the relationships that you have with your black friends should be solely focused on race.
Right.
And it's like, it's counterproductive to what the book wants you to do. Because you cannot, in Robin's ideology, have black friends.
Right.
You have to have black colleagues that you are constantly recognizing their race.
Yep.
Whose race you are constantly recognizing, I mean.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's really well said. I guess my final thoughts are, this is the absolute apex of distilled neoliberalism. I mean, that's what it is. Like, you should question why is it that this woman is talking about how everyone has this bias and there's no way to escape this and you're all horrible. And even she went so far, like we said earlier, to say that this is now worse than Jim Crow. I mean, that is a psychotic person. But George Floyd gets killed. Every corporation is in solidarity with this whole thing. Mm-hmm. And her job is to go into the largely white boardrooms and sell these people on this idea. And so she is a really disgusting, narcissistic racist who, if now that this book is like a #1 best times seller or whatever, and everyone's reading it, she's now she's dangerous. She's a very dangerous person. These ideas are fucking dangerous, and it's setting us back a lot. I mean, like, she's not solely responsible for this, but she's basically put out the manifesto of these fucking bad ideas. And
it has become so beyond political to the point where it's now moral.
Yes.
To do something like this, and it is. It's the perfect example is your friend's therapist recommending that she read White Fragility.
Crazy.
Insanity is what that is. And
like the therapist was willing to absolutely do something inappropriately personal and suggest, and that's again, because it's become,
it transcends this professionalism to, like, if you were a therapist, you don't express your politics to somebody. No. But because this is not politics anymore, this is, you're a good person or you're a bad person.
And it's
this is the book you should read.
It's one of the most effective grifts the left have pulled off. Mm-hmm. Because, like, now if you challenge any of these ideas, you're bad. And again, it was like to the quote of like Donald Trump was this response because of racism. It's like, nah, it was more, I mean, yeah, some of it maybe, but most of it was other shit. But she, again, because she's unwilling or purposefully ignoring the intersection of race and class, she'll never be an honest person. Never. And I don't know, dude, I think she's a very sick person, and I hope she gets help at some point, but she never will.
She won't. She'll just keep getting paychecks.
Yep, exactly.
That's what it is.
All right.
This is really what this is about. Fucking down with the elites who claim to be on our side.
I told you, it's neoliberalism. I mean, it's like absolutely this. It's the left has gotten so fucking decadent that, like,
I love that word to describe it.
Like every single, because, like, again, for her to make the claim that right now is more racist than Jim Crow, her life is so decadent. And it's gonna collapse. Like every great society, this happens every single time, and so I don't know. This book and how it's gonna be implemented into corporate culture, and I think a lot of other different, like, even blue collar type cultures, we're gonna see the decline of society in some kind of way.
Well, folks, we saved you the trouble of having to read it yourself. Yeah. Don't buy it. If you have to,
we torrented it. Yeah.
Allegedly. If you have to, torrent it. Don't buy it. Don't give her any money. Don't invite her to your corporations to give a seminar.
She's a very sick person.
She is.
Like, sincerely. I think she's got anyway, if you do read the book, you'll just realize that all of this really dark shit is just it's her own subconscious, and she's got a lot of serious problems. This woman. Yeah. That's it.
I agree. Thank you guys for being here and sitting through that torture. We love you guys, we will be back on Friday with an Animal Crossing stream because we haven't done one in a while, and we need some wholesome activity on here.
Yep. All right. Adios.